Hello, welcome to Squirrel Tail. In this video, I'm going to show you my process for taking a piece of firewood and make it into a billet for turning. Now, if you cut with firewood, you can find some really good turning wood in your firewood pile. In this case, I have some really nice cherry, and I'm going to turn it into a billet that I'll later turn. There's a couple things you gotta factor in when doing this and really selecting the piece of wood to begin with. First is how much does it have the right color, and does it have enough of that color, and where's the center on the piece. Now if you look, there's a center right there, so that gives me a nice section. Now I could just let this wood dry and then really do nothing and then turn it. But there's a couple things to keep in mind. One, when wood seasons, the general rule is 1 inch per year to make it into a usable piece of turning wood. So right now, and that's per side, so I'm looking at about a 9-10 inch piece of wood. Theoretically, this would take almost 5 years to dry, and a good portion of that wood is not usable. And also, if you just do that, it would end up developing cracks like that, which will make sections of it unusable. So there's a few steps I do to make it more usable. So one thing I'll first think about is how big of a piece I want. Now, I am making a horn plug. That's what I intend for this piece of cherry. So I really only need something maybe 1 inch bigger than that. This is something to really consider. When I was younger, I would always try to get the biggest piece of wood possible. But that's going to do two things. Like I said earlier, it's going to increase the time to dry. And also then you put it on the lathe and it's so big that it won't even, maybe not even fit in your lathe. Or you have to turn down 4 inches and put it on the ground to sawdust to get to the size you want. So yeah, you want it big enough that it'll accomplish all your goals, and a little bit bigger for extra room, but you don't want to make it bigger than you need. I mean, there's been times when I've split out pieces of turning wood that literally wouldn't fit in the lathe I have. So my first thing I'm going to do with this is I'm going to split it. Now my first split, I'm going to use a wedge and a hammer to do this. You could try to smack it with a hatchet, but that would be you'd have to be very lucky. And I'm going to split it right at that center mark. So I got that section off. Now I'm going to split the front of it. And I'm going to, on this piece, come right on the edge of that dark color that I want. So, you know, cherry and walnut, this is a big thing. Other woods, it's not as much. Now I'm going to come through and get the sides. You know, same thing. Now that I got the sides out, I'm going to come and kind of take the corners off a little bit using a wide chisel. You don't have to do this, but I think it saves you some time. And this is a little bit more precise in the wood wedge. Something else to keep in mind is that you might end up with, depending on the grain, end up with one side bigger than the other. That's fine, and when that happens, I'll normally come back through and take a few more small cuts. Just whittling that down. So now that I have it whittled down to a nice size billet, it's about 4 inches in size, which will make a nice size plug. I am going to seal the ends. Now, something to consider, if you have a piece that already has splitting, shallow splitting, I would try before this step to take a saw and cut below that. You know, you might have to cut 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, maybe 1 inch off it to get it to where the wood is relatively solid, because those splits are going to try to continue. But to seal it, now some people use wood glue. I actually find that wax has worked pretty good for me. And it's a lot cheaper. Find it on candle, or go to the dollar store and get yourself a cheap candle. Then take your torch and like that, you get a nice coating of wax on the end, and then just let the wax harden up. So the last thing I like to do is to write the date on it. So this is 12/22. I like to write in a few spots so it's easy to see. This way, I know that if I pick this piece of wood up, say 6 months from now, I'm going to look for a piece of wood, I know that this piece is not ready to be used because it's only been drying for 6 months. I like to be on the conservative side. I probably won't use this piece of wood for another 3 years, 2.5, 3 years. There are techniques that people say put in the microwave or kiln drying, whatever. I don't mess with that stuff. I figure it's probably best to just have the patience and air drying. So if you agree with that, let me know in the comments. If you don't, tell me your technique in the comments. And if you have a different method, tell me what your method is. I would love to hear it. But I will put this up in the rack, on a rack. Now, ideally, if you put it inside, it will dry a little better. Obviously, the climate will have an effect. If you're storing it in a barn in southern Louisiana around the swamp, it might take longer for wood to season than if you do in Arizona, like in Arizona or in a climate control environment. I like to keep it somewhere where it's relatively warm, high up. Seems to help a little bit. But, you know, let it dry good, and then a few years from now, I have a piece of wood here that will be plenty good to dry. So, I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and have a good day.